participating in it.
Paul, are you there?
Yeah, I'm on.
Yeah, okay, good. Go ahead and start the meeting. You want to do the roll call?
Yes, John Helfrey,
There.
Dennis Bodar. Here. Paul Berry
Here.
and Mark DeMore. Here.
Okay, please be advised that anyone on Zoom for this meeting is giving their consent to being recorded and aired on YouTube in the near future. Hopefully, everybody in the room also. Before we get to acknowledge our guest here, I want to welcome Mark DeMore for volunteering to complete our membership. So we have a complement of 5. Looking forward to good things happening. And I also want to take this time to acknowledge Mike Stallings, Dick Branningham for their tireless efforts in starting up this tree commission and their 18 years devotion and service to it in the town of Concord. I'd like to get a motion for the approval of the March 28 minutes.
I have a motion for that.
Okay, Dennis is making a motion, anybody second it?
Second that? Yeah, I second that motion.
All approved, say aye.
Aye.
Hi.
Okay, I'd like to take this time to introduce Rebecca Emerson Wells, who likes to go by the name Emerson, is that correct? She is going to be with the U of I grant program, and she is now embedded in town, I believe.
Second day on the job.
Yeah.
Thanks for letting me be here.
So she's going to give us some background, what they're going to do. I think the Liberty, that last Zoom meeting we had, I said the urban green infrastructure. Printed all
Okay.
this out.
Perfect. It'll look slightly similar. I wasn't sure what you had seen or not seen.
Okay, well, I'm just going to pass out. This is just 3 pages from that. It's giving the program goals.
Mhm.
So
Perfect.
we can do this in connection with what you brought. Paul, I believe you said you saw this when it was on Zoom last month.
Yeah, I believe so. Yep.
So you have the information. So Emerson, you have
Perfect. Yeah, thank you all for having me. My name is Emerson. I hope you can see the screen. If not, I can send out the PowerPoint. I'm a visual learner, so I like looking at something when people talk to me. So I hope this is helpful. Like John shared, I'm going to be working with Kevin Dante this summer, and the tree commission is going to be a huge resource to my work. So I know it's been a while since maybe you connected with Steph, I think at that last meeting in March. But I was just going to share a little bit more about what this work looks like and how we can like collaborate and benefit each other. If it looks too familiar, let me know. I'm happy to answer any further questions, but just replacing ourselves a little. All right, this is me. My name is Emerson. I'm from West Jefferson, North Carolina, which is, I had to investigate about the same population as Culver. So I'm used to small towns, but typically mountain towns. So used to being in a valley and not in a lake. So that's fun and new to me. I studied at Elon University in North Carolina, and I'm a current graduate student at the O'Neill School at IU Bloomington. My favorite tree is a baobab, which is over on that right there. It stores all of its water in its trunk. I think it's super neat. And I'm excited to be in Culver for the next 10 to 12 months. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Urban Green Infrastructure Resilience cohort, of which Culver is a part this year. So I wanted to talk about the McKinney Midwest Climate Project. It's the project of IU's Environmental Resilience Institute. And the Climate County has two programs. So you have the McKinney Climate Fellows, which is a program for students to kind of provide a fellowship or internship in a town in Indiana. So how do we keep students that are in Indiana continuing to do good work in Indiana, and how can we expand that good work outside of the location of their campus and that community? And then on the other side of the Midwest Climate Project, there's the resilience cohort, which there's this idea of connecting local governments with tools and trainings to think about climate impacts on the community level. And there is some intersection between those two programs. The Urban Green Infrastructure program is at the center of both of those. So I am part of the McKinney Climate Fellows. Culver is part of the resilience cohort, and together we are working in kind of that nexus, that area. So Culver is one of 4 communities that is part of this year's Urban Green Infrastructure Resilience cohort. The other communities are Goshen, Dearborn County, and Hammond. So I wanted to define urban green infrastructure and resilience in the way that the Environmental Resilience Institute is defining it, just to help place this all a little bit. So urban green infrastructure is green spaces. You can think about infrastructure as something that needs to be managed. So thinking about green spaces that are managed or have like an intentionality in whatever benefits they may serve, whether that be social or environmental, and recognizing that a lot of these spaces are social ecological spaces. So though this program specifically looks like trees, we can also think about green roofs, rain gardens, bioswales, other forms of living or green infrastructure. We can think of resilience as the capacity to sustain functioning and well-being in response to disturbance, and how urban green infrastructure, or UGI here on out, is increasingly being included in community resilience programming. So something that I'm thinking of this summer in this work, and hope that you guys can support me in and might be thinking about as well, is how can we think about where these trees will go to serve long-term benefits in the community. I'm working with the town of Culver and the ERI, which I know you are familiar with. As I mentioned, the resilience cohort helps prepare those communities across Indiana. It began in 2019. So this is the 6th year running of that cohort. And it kind of brings together experts, local governments, and students to work on assessment, planning, and implementation in some area. The 2 tracks of those cohorts, like I said, are the urban green infrastructure, but they are also launching a new one, which is heat pump acceleration. So thinking about energy efficiency in the heat pump area, which is not my forte, but that is something other people are working on. When thinking about UGI cohort, there's lots of questions of how did this come to be? How is it functioning? It's functioning with funds from the Inflation Reduction Act that awarded $1.5 billion to the USDA Forest Service. I know there was concern with the ending of contracts or ending of grant funding with the new administration, but that this program does not seem to be impacted as of now. The ERI has hosted a 4-year program with annual cohorts in Indiana. So again, this is the 5th year that there has been cities in Indiana doing this work. So we're by no means a guinea pig, but also recognizing that each community looks very different. Culver is a very unique community in and of itself. Benefits of this cohort include a McKinney Climate Fellow, which is me, to do 400 hours of work over the summer, then access to trusted subject matter experts, skill building for local government staff, Adjourn maps, and subsidized costs. So I'm working under Kevin, as you all know, and we're going to be accessing some of those technical sessions together. So not only building my skills, but what can we learn together? So then when I'm no longer based in Culver, this training and this skill set continues into the fall. So the mission and the guiding principle of this cohort is to create diverse, healthy, and accessible urban forests for all. I want to emphasize diverse and healthy. I know that when we think about trees, we can think about all of their benefits, but we can also think about the disservices or costs that trees can provide as well. So we know they provide shade, stormwater and flood management. I think also to note for Culver and aesthetic, right? A lot of people come here in the summer. There's a huge emphasis on recreation and vacation. But also, recognizing the costs of having tree removed, or the cost of maintenance, accessibility. So we see that a lot. And with tree roots, when trees get mature, what does that mean if a greenway becomes cracked or things of that nature? And just also the positionality costs. So like the additional burden that may be on people or an organization to continue maintenance of trees following their planting or their installation. And because Culver is a smaller community, that's definitely something that looks different in this town than others. So my goal this summer and the overall program goals are to increase community resilience through expanded canopy cover, plant trees where they are needed the most, and then sites will be identified through canopy cover analysis, and then ensure success and health of planted trees with a tree maintenance plan and contracted professional follow-up care. So this is the UGI resilience cohort timeline. We have the next slide. And right now we're in phase 2. So I was not involved with the phase 1 behind the scenes, but I know that looked like meeting with Stephanie Freedom Day from the Environmental Resilience Institute. I know that looked like a lot of work with Kevin. And that also looked at data being collected and an urban tree canopy cover analysis prepared with the support of Davie Resource Group. So my role now in phase 2, now that I'm based in Culver, is to identify priority planting areas based on that urban tree canopy cover data that was prepared by Davie, and then work within the community, engage with the community to help identify priority tree planting areas. And so that's definitely something I'm going to rely on your knowledge, background, and expertise to inform as well. Here's just another look at phase 2. Right now, in the next few weeks, I'm going to be reviewing that urban tree cover, canopy cover, and create those priority maps. And by mid-July, I know that was a question of what trees are going to be planted and where. And there's going to be 115 potential sites identified by early to mid-July. Following those sites and that designation and into August, those sites are going to be finalized as well. So that's a lot of big words, lots of things. So what am I going to do exactly while I'm in it? Primarily data analysis, so building from that urban tree canopy assessment. I was hoping to maybe share that today, but since I started yesterday, I was unable to get to it. But basically, think about considerations related to biophysical, social vulnerability related to climate or environmental impacts. And then think about how these variables are weighted per community. So that's something that you guys can definitely inform. What are we thinking about our issues in Culver, areas we want to address? Something that's interesting with Culver within this cohort, a lot of this work is done based on census tracts as part of the IRA funding designation to serve vulnerable or disadvantaged communities. Sometimes you can do that work by looking at census tracts and like population data, income data, things of that nature within different census tracts. All of Culver exists within one census tract. So that's going to look a little bit different here. And a lot of these kind of values or variables that we're looking to focus on are going to become, I think, kind of come from a lot of conversation and community engagement. Which, speaking of community engagement, I'm hoping to kind of start broadly and meet with different stakeholder groups, which I would also love your input on, who to identify with. But hoping by June or July, kind of get out into Culver and kind of share ideas and connect with kind of different actors in the community. I'm particularly interested in folks that live here year round personally, but also recognizing that summer is a time where, the population in Culver, I was told doubles. So I think that's definitely something to consider in, when thinking about planting 100 or so trees in town. What do we want what purpose or goal, are we hoping to serve, if any? And then are there any certain like populations or, areas of town that are a interest point or area of interest? Finally, I'm going to create a tree planning and maintenance plan using that data analysis, that's then informed by no planting site data and further community engagements. A big part of that is going to be future considerations. So knowing that, you have to plant a tree, but you also have to care for it. So a lot of these benefits come from mature canopy, mature trees, and you can't get a mature tree if there's not maintenance or management or some type of support in, getting it out of that kind of 3-year establishment period. That will also come with priority planting analysis for the town of Culver and then planting map as well. Then what? Then we enter phase 3. Phase 3 is going to be through that August and November period where there's planting preparation. I will no longer be based in Culver. I will be back in school, but I will dedicate about 40 hours during this fall to help finalize planning tree planting. The resource group is responsible for ordering trees and supporting planning preparation. And then there's access to a community engagement specialist that Kevin has been in contact with, that will also support in planning that event. So I'm hopeful that even though I won't be in Culver, I will still have a hand in kind of coming back up in northern Indiana and help in that as well. When thinking about tree planting, typically those community events have looked like volunteers or activities with the planting of about 25 trees. We want this to be something that the community wants to do, is actively engaged in, not me coming from Bloomington saying plant these trees here and then leaving. So definitely thinking about how we could advertise or encourage community engagement. I know Kevin had an interest in youth engagement in that work as well. The rest of the trees will be planted by Davey, the subcontractor, in the following days. And then with Davey Resource Group, the trees will get watering, inspection, and mulching for 3 years, with pruning in year 3. So that will really assist the establishment period of those trees. And then then after is determined over the summer, in conversations with town manager and other stakeholders. And deliverables, so these are my big plans that I work on this summer, but the overall outcome is to increase tree canopy where it's needed most and a plan to keep planted trees healthy. Thank you guys for listening. Yeah, that was a lot of information thrown at you. I'm happy to answer any questions. Then I might post some questions.
So you're gonna recommend the sites that we put all these trees, and then
Yeah.
what about the types of trees?
That's going to come from community interest. I think a big area question mark I have right now is thinking about that post 3 years of care. So I know there's a tree commission, but I think in other towns this would look like a town arborist, usually housed in the park department. Culver doesn't really have that position, kind of like designated umbrella in place. So I wasn't entirely sure what tree maintenance has looked like in the past, if it's a subcontractor in Culver. I mean, I know there's the tree commission, but I know you all are just volunteers. So I think the tree species with a focus on natives will also maybe be informed by the care that can be provided
Sure.
after those 3
Less maybe.
Do you have a list anywhere of the trees that might be available that we can select from?
Yeah, I can reach out to Davey. I know they usually work with a local nursery, but definitely focus on natives. I mean, I have walked around Culver a little bit. I know there's lots of maples. I know there's lots of oak, but thinking about diversifying the canopy. So, these are big trees that look beautiful and mature. But also, if there's any species that Culver is interested in, some cities might say, I would think it'd be really great if we could plant more trees like edible fruits. Maybe we can look at mulberries. Other towns were like, that's a mess. That's gonna take, our street department is gonna hate us when they all fall. That's also something to think about. So I think that's really gonna come from a knowledge base that I don't have, because I don't know Culver and what that's looked like in the past. So I'm definitely learning that, but I'd love to hear if you have any special interest trees or species that have done well.
Could you make that list available sometime sorted soon?
Yes.
Are you totally opposed to anything that's not native, but turns out to be a great street tree, doesn't seem to have a lot of problems, bugs, disease, et cetera, or is it all gonna be native?
I don't think opposed. There's nothing in place that says have to plant natives. That's just something that's recommended. So if there is also something that is in mind, definitely can consider it.
Let me give you a little bit where we kind of regulate it and what we can do. Our focus is on parkways.
Okay.
And so we look at the size of the tree being what would fit this parkway. And overhead wires, in some cases, we have narrow parkways, you can't plant a tree there, it's too narrow. In some cases, we've taken out older trees and then they got a root problem and you've ground stumps, but you still have that problem. Last year, last year, Dennis and I went around the town and we looked at sites that were a possibility for new plantings. There's a legend on the left-hand side of that. We try to put large trees, smaller trees, medium trees. So we try to take in the whole town in consideration under the parkway situation. And if you like, this is what we did last year with plantings and tree trimmings, and this is the type of trees that we put in last year. And it's got this, Dennis was instrumental in picking this out. Our previous, some years ago, we had a person on the board that owned the nursery and was very astute as far as trees. They were in the nursery business for many, many years. And they went to Arizona for warmer weather. So we have Dennis. Dennis has been helping us out with this. Been a big help as far as picking out trees.
I'm interested in this maintenance thing because we basically have no maintenance.
Right.
Unless we go around and do some things.
Okay.
It seems like it would be a good idea, if possible, since you're gonna be here for a while, we can do this informally where we go around in maybe John's golf cart. We can look at some sites, some other sites and pick each other's brains.
Yeah,
And then, of course, we'll stop at Mark's restaurant for snacks, I assume. And, but that might be a good idea just to sort of informally take a look at what's here, what we've done, what some problems are. Because maintenance has been a huge issue. Because most homeowners, I can't say all, but most homeowners don't do any maintenance, including watering, remulching, the works. And that can be really tough, as you well know, on a new tree. That first 3-year period is really critical. So I'm guessing when you talked about the 3-year maintenance thing, that just applies to the new tree, the new 100, doesn't it? All right. And we can't lie there. That's okay. Just thought I'd try.
Yeah. Not on Zoom. No. No, I personally would love to walk around and kind of like get your insight in these areas that you've identified for great. I think it's also important to note, I mean, Culver is a pretty small town. 100 trees are a lot of trees. Originally, this was a partnership with Plymouth. So it was gonna be 50 trees in Culver, 50 trees in Plymouth. But Plymouth stepped away from your program, which is great for you guys, get 50 more trees, but also thinking about both the maintenance piece, but also, space where we want to put them. There's lots of mature trees I've noticed. which are beautiful, but I also think personally when thinking about a healthy or, healthy canopy that also looks like diversity in age. So if you think about the park, for example, over by the beach, got a lot of trees. They're all pretty big old trees. So if something, something might think about about areas where you could also think about diversity in age. About for 5 years from now, assuming maybe this tree would die, 10 years from now, we could already have a tree planted that can kind of offset those benefits.
Speaking of trees, I noticed in one of your photos, there was a picture, and I don't know if it's just a generic photo, but the trees were in a special type of, you showed a picture of some trees in a bag ready to be planted. Have you seen ever any of these, what these trees look like? Because they can come bare rooted with a damp moss, or it can come in a pot or bulb and burlap, and sometimes that makes a lot of difference.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I don't, because I don't know what David Research Group, who they will be contracting with, but I can definitely ask, because I agree, in my experience, it's made a difference as well. I'll make a note to ask about that.
So new trees that are part of our budget for this year, and that is up in the air exactly what that budget's gonna be.
Well, that's the next, part
Okay,
we're gonna go over and see.
you're not supposed to have anything to do with any trees that come out of our budget, our normal yearly budget. Is that correct? Yours will be dealing with 100.
I will be dealing with the 100, but I definitely can think about collaborating. I'm happy to assist however I may. I mean, I think it makes sense that if there's other trees that you have a budget to purchase and want to, increase that number, that's definitely something I think should be incorporated in the mapping I'm looking at. Like the no planting sites. I know, and we don't have to talk about it now, but I did have a question about the tree removal that's occurring next month, because I think that's also kind of impacting the data I'm looking at as well. But if you have plans to purchase more trees, yeah, I think that could definitely be included in this work in some way.
That's gonna be part of our discussion, because they have a list of trees that the town wants to remove. And I went around and I had 8 trees that are not on their list, and their list doesn't coincide with my list, so
Okay.
we need to discuss some of that, so. Moving forward on that.
I think, but I do want to ask some questions about that, but I'm trying to think about other questions I had. One being that I know Culver was a tree city, but I don't believe it no longer is technically. I
We just didn't sign up for it.
Okay, is that something you'd be interested in or want to do? Because I can definitely help work towards that application.
Well, we had it for several years and really didn't do us any good. Just put a sign out saying they're Tree City. That's about it. Doesn't do you any good. Looks nice.
Are there some benefits we can get from being designated a tree city that you know of?
Off the top of my head, no. But I think like thinking about, I briefly looked over the Culver 2040 plan, thinking about like recreation, thinking about, looking towards like more permanent residence in Culver. It can be like a talking point or a point of pride if you want it to be. If it's not, that's also okay. But to advertise, this is something we care about, and that's also something others care.
So no matter how many trees we have or don't have, if we're a tree city, if nothing else, it looks good on PR for the town of Culver. I'm assuming that's something, there's nothing wrong with good PR, because if we are good enough to be designated that, it can get out there, that's fine. It's just, just a PR thing.
I've also seen it be like a point of conversation or can help in certain like funding things. So for example, if you were to apply to grants, or I'm not quite sure how that might function here, but we need more money to do tree care. Hey, we're already a tree city, we're really trying. That could also maybe provide some benefits.
want to help with the application, probably wouldn't do us any harm in doing it.
Is it an annual thing or is it for an extended period of time?
Also need to look up, I work for the city of Bloomington Parks Department, and we just did a B city. So my brand is all B city instead of 3 city. Too many city designations, but I can definitely report back. I want to say it's like an annual
Just a
re-up
renewal
thing,
or
renewal.
what are you know the prerequisites offhand of it? Is it number of trees per acre or something?
Yes.
I can chime in.
Yeah.
I filled it out a couple of times. It's a report on what tree activity or what activity the tree commission participated in as far as planting, pruning, removing. There's also something in there about education. I think for a long time, Rosalie Bo and I would go to the kindergarten at the Colwood Community School and distribute pine trees to get them started. Any sort of press activity, promotion of trees would be included in that, and then the Arbor Day proclamation. So we've continued doing the Arbor Day
I was
proclamation.
gonna say, I'm pretty sure I saw getting other backpacks. Trees.
Yeah, I
It's
don't-
hilarious, yeah.
I'm not aware, I don't know. It used to be the bill for the trees would come to the tree commission, and I haven't seen a bill in the last couple of years, so I don't know what I can have taken place.
And my tree from 1999 is still growing on State Street. So that's- I remember that.
I'm sort of confused. The 100 trees we're talking about, are those, since we're all collaborating and this is all new to all of us, are those gonna be limited to our parkway space? That's the space
No.
between the tree and the sidewalk? We can do anything with it.
Right.
We could use 100 then if we're talking about parks and schools and
Yeah.
things easy.
That's,
So,
And this is one of the things that, in order to, and as far as our budget goes, we don't have a lot to work with, but if we want to participate in street department, helping them take some more down, if we want to plant, we might want to plant, like dogwood would give us a nice healthy tree. Might look at entrance and exits on streets that are mainly used to show our goals, trees we pick out.
mhm.
And you got School Street, you got Jefferson, Lakeshore Drive, we could put trees that we pick out there and then use the 100 overpass.
yeah, definitely not limited to like right of way or parkway. I think I would be interested, and I know we're getting to this later, but thinking about the tree removals, if they are like kind of concentrated in any areas, there seems to be a common problem. Is it like poor maintenance, or it's like 20 trees in this one area did poorly? Maybe that's indicative of like a soil issue, or maybe that wouldn't be a great space to, plant trees. So I think that's also something to think about, and I don't anticipate that necessarily, but also thinking.
Some of these big old trees have caused damage
Mhm.
with curbs, sidewalks, and
Mhm.
breaking up things, and they're so big that it won't. They have limbs in some cases, so some of those are on this list that will be taken down. It's time for them. And I went around, and some of the others were stuff that we planted over the years, but just didn't quite make it. So there are several in Jefferson, they only get 6 or 7 feet, but they're dead. They didn't make it due to lack of maintenance now.
Mhm.
So, but all the trees that we planted several hundred trees over the last 10 years. So if we only lose 4 or 5, I think it's a pretty good record.
How have they been maintained? Were we counting on
The street, well,
residents?
Dennis would do it manually a lot. Dick Branningham would get out there with his truck and put a big tank on there. Paul, Paul, are you there?
Yeah, online.
Yeah, you got some kind of a container that would help tremendously
To water.
with water. Make it easier for us to do it because we really don't get much help from the street department.
They'll help us when they're available. And if they're not available and we have to wait 10 days, that drought can kill brand new trees. But when they are available, they're terrific. They have 1,000-gallon tank on a truck with, I mean, it's, we can water the 25 trees in a morning going around. So that's what I'm always shooting for. But if not, we can go with that.
So we don't have anybody but ourselves. Same thing with pruning. Dick and I would go around and get the low hanging fruit, so to speak, whatever we could reach, prune, and that would save us.
Sure. And that helps a lot. Sometimes that's all that needs to, for the most part.
So it'd be great if we had a designated
Mhm.
group of people, 3 or 4 people that would come water these trees every several.
Do we not have, if we're getting 100 trees and that limits what we have to buy, do we not have room in the budget to pay a professional to guarantee the?
We're gonna have a 3-year warranty.
Yeah, 3 years.
On those 100,
On those 100.
right? But the warranty, that means who's gonna take care of them?
Daily resource.
Oh, they are. They're gonna come
For
through
that
town
first 3 years. Yeah.
and water and prune.
Well, they do mulch too.
Yes.
You know,
As far as I know, Davy Resource Group for this first 3 years does the watering, the mulching, and then pruning in here.
will they, like a lot of towns, but Culver really is up at the top of the list. We have a deer problem. It's not every neighborhood, but they do come around and the bucks do the rub in late summer, early
That's
fall.
what gets my trees.
Right.
That's my nemesis.
Deer, I mean, I wonder if we have a deer guard we've sent away for and it's worked really well. Really tough plastic. We 4 foot, but we can cut if we need to.
Yeah, the black,
Yeah.
that's what I used to.
And they're not bad looking. They don't detract or anything like that, but a budget, I would think all new trees should have that in Culver because.
It's a really cheap protection. too.
Yeah.
Last year, we cut them up in 4 sections.
Yeah,
And they're good for, I mean, they'll expand with.
They'll last
for
forever.
5 years, not forever, eventually.
end up having to take them down sometimes. They get sick.
So if Davies doesn't supply that, I'm sure we can do that.
That could be in our budget. Sure.
Well, we had, budget is 11.8, that's what we got.
Is our budget gonna be on for tonight or is that, you wanna put it off for next
I
time?
wanna do something tonight too. At least get us in the direction, because we're waiting for Emerson to show up to see what that's gonna happen, how that's gonna implement our situation and vice versa.
So the trees that need to be replaced, we can use some of the 100, but we don't have to. So that's where the debate in the budget. So we're gonna spend some of that budget to replace them.
We can
And then-
do that.
A lot of the 100 can be new locations.
Right.
Okay.
So that's why I said, well, if we get Dogwood Hill, now you had mentioned you might be able to get some trees that are in a different spot.
Yeah, that opens up a whole new history, a can of worms for us. We've had great luck with working with Dogwood Hills out of Middlebury. They're really
amazing.
terrific, but it's kind of expensive. The trees all come, I think we made sort of a little error last year and they gave us a break on trees if we bought them early because they already had them dug and balled and burlapped and they wanted to get rid of them, but they were healthy, most of them. The problem is we had to plant them early and then we had the 2 droughts last summer. And then that's where I started having to carry water from my own house, which was okay. You know, I need the exercise. But, that got a little daunting, but it can be done. Look what Johnny Appleseed did. So
Well, you would normally plant in the fall.
Yeah, it's absolutely.
the other thing to look at is whether they dig it fresh or it's been sitting around for a while, is balled and burlap. I can't find a really great study out there. Mine is only incidental observations, but sometimes the history used to be the burlap rots. And so, the tree roots can get through. There's tiny little holes, but not big enough, some of them, and it'll be fine. And sometimes I have dug up old trees and found out it hadn't rotted so well. And it's a real challenge. When you first plant a tree, that's the challenge. It's like having a baby. you know, and they need all the help they can get. So you have a tree root that are confined to the burlap, and then you have drought periods. And that tree has a hard enough time. You've cut off a lot of the feeder roots when you cut the tree in burlap, but you've cut off a lot of the roots that actually do the absorption of water, minerals. So you're stuck with whatever's down there in the ball and burlap, and sometimes that can be really tough on a tree. So I was looking into, and this is more work, this is where we might figure something out. If you buy a tree in the typical, when you go to Lowe's and see the black pots of shrubs and trees, that's really great in a way because you can literally lift the tree out of it or cut the pot away. And then the roots are exposed and you can mess with the roots and they can start doing their thing. They don't have to go through anything to rot period. But it's a little more work because Dogwood Hills, most nurseries don't do that. They bring them in the burlap. So we can find a place where we can get trees a little bit cheaper. They're in the pots. That means we don't have the Dogwood Hills would do the planting for us, dig the holes, do all that, which is great. And they're wonderful at it. But you're stuck with that tree in a drought. If we do the potted thing, we're gonna have to do it or get some help or something like that. But it's healthier and quicker for the tree to take.
Last year, the trees that we planted from Dogwood Hills was $400 a tree. 20 trees, you got $8,000. So if we go that route, and the reason Dogwood Hills pretty far away, takes time to get here. Usually have two good guys that are very, very good. And they're professional tree people, not hackers.
Yeah, no, I'm very familiar. They've planted all my trees.
Well, we can consider that. I could give them a call and see what. Have cars, they don't like.
Have you been working with Curtis directly? No?
Yeah, they don't like to come here unless I think the.
Yeah, they fill a truck,
25.
absolutely,
Yeah,
especially if
yeah,
they bring their spade truck.
I don't know. If we have before.
We're not buying big trees per se.
No,
Obviously, there's a cost prohibitive, but you talk about some of those entrances. You know, there's that threshold. Ruth Domingo. was
Yeah,
big on
we have
that.
about a 2-inch diameter, 2.5 inch or something, but you can get that same thing through, for example, Whiteman Cook's nursery north of Plymouth in a pot. And it's just, like I said, that means we have to plant it. But, you know, to dig one of those, I mean, it's not that big of a deal. We don't have to, they plant them all in 1 or 2 days. We could actually have the trees delivered somewhere and then plant them as we get help to plant them.
Paul owns a property, trailer park. And Paul, he's gonna bring you in on this. He's talked about using your property for a staging area. So if it would behoove us to go that route, pick out trees and that, we can put them over there. In his area, water them all at the same time.
Does he have water? Paul, you have water on site?
It's available, but it'd be very spendy. That would just, something to ask on the town to maybe waive, water costs, just run an irrigation meter price, potable water. Other options too, you could do some gravity feed. Been working on getting more IBC totes if needed. They'll probably be free. Yeah, let me kind of offer up something on a discussion about where we might go over a cycle. I'm the guy that volunteered to kind of do out-year planning, where we take the comprehensive plan for the town of Culver for the year 2040, 15 years out. That's the end state. How you get there is, necking it down into smaller bites and time phase. I would suggest we use a 5-year sliding scale kind of thing. And the reason for that is the government, when you do pass-throughs, sometimes it ties to the color of money, whether it's MCA, major construction account, R&D, which is research and development, OMA, which is operations maintenance account. And I think Culver saw that with the path going on the old train track. They probably had a pass-through tied to a 5-year MCA account, and use it, lose it, there's implications. So the rationale is 5 years out. 5 years out, you use year 5 out, 4 out, 3 out, just to look what's out there, what's on the horizon, what are the long lead items, and, get ready, search the funding, work the agreements, see what's out there so you can be ready to execute, compete for grants, and whether within a 2-year cycle. This first 2-year cycle would be year 2025, 2026, and it slides. So, the next 2-year cycle will be 26, 27. So with the end state of 2026, I would offer up a theme of 250 trees in the culvert area, not necessarily town limits, to celebrate the nation's 250th anniversary. So go with that theme, and then it's a running total, and the first 100 are going in this fall. The sequence I'd offer up is traditionally we get into a cycle of major installs, when possible, in the fall, less volatility, better success, things like that. Then use spring as the follow-up and kind of, fluff it out, do whatever, and get a little more education / interest. And that would be done about 2 weeks before Arbor Day and Earth Day. And I think they're like 2 days apart next year. And the reason not to do it actually on Earth Day, there's, folks, you can focus on that, but this would be kind of like a preliminary educational thing and all that. So that would be the thought process. Necking down to get to that point, the deliverable for this year, we're hands off on sticking trees in the ground right now. Doesn't mean we can't augment that or get some derivative value. What I mean by derivative value is I'll be doing or whatever, our gal here from IU, hitting up Davies, saying, okay, as a separate thing, you're going to be here, you're going to be doing something, what can you do for us as a separate contract? If we came to you for X more trees and you're already going to be here, what kind of deal could you do? Going back to the spring thing, we have a funding source, get alignment. One is current budget. Two, I think we need a holistic value of looking at 2 other funding sources. One is nonprofit. We currently have $200 in the nonprofit donation bucket, if you will. So we can say, hey, donate a tree, or not donate a tree, donate dollars. And if you want to, go down, see Karen, cut a check into the tree fund. And we can, talk to other nonprofits, Adam Theta with Lake Max Environmental and some other folks, and hey, would you like to throw a few dollars? And if you do, can you throw it into the town of Culver tree bucket? Then the other thing will probably have everybody's head explode is redevelopment commission. My thought is redevelopment, we're all parcel owners with various improvements thereon. So trees, I think, are infrastructure tied with the curb. So I'm kind of saying, hey, redevelopment commission, let's get on track here at ponying in on infrastructure. And that infrastructure is, trees and stuff. I'd like to tie in, I'm rambling a little bit here, but to get this timeline, I synced up with what I saw was basically there'll be some kind of list. I would suggest that we have 3 looks. The first look is what the town committee has already done, because it's going to be tied to a geospecific location. IU comes up with their geospecific. I would assume there'll be overlap. The third one I'm bringing in, I talked to NIPSCO. So we've had concerns about pruning and stuff. So I've got a call out to him with a notional that on or about mid-July when IU has their first decrement list, that NIPSCO corporate, not the utility guys that we've been, dealing with pruning, but I've identified the urban forest vegetation management corporate rep, and she's willing to come down with, a member of her staff. And these are not electrician people; these are arborists, biologists, and all that stuff. And so that third look, and this is where IU, I'm thinking about future funding opportunities and all that. IU and NIPSCO get together, and what can augment, the maintenance program is a look from the utility company. The utility company, I think, can add a lot of things like, this is why, we think a tree needs to be here or there, and why this kind of tree reaches for the sun, and which trees, because we've done tens of thousands of cuts, due to ice, wind, plague. They know, emerald ash borer, Dutch elm, Vercillium wilt, whatever. So they're willing to do that, do an education thing, and so kind of get a deconflict with the utilities. And then I kind of think we're going to be able to get a couple dollars from NIPSCO, get some trees, and then they're willing to do, advice on different things. So I'd like, roll with that. And then as we go with this theme thing is, you got your trees, now what? Well, they're healthy. Let's start getting a healthy thing going. Not necessarily the tree commission, but there's ways to get extra, funding and use and input that walking around is a healthy thing, make America healthy again. There's a lot of dog walking at Culver, and that was, I think, Culver special. A lot of dog walking, just walking because, and all that. And when we do that, I think I got a line through the state health to do some stuff, to augment that. And the last bureaucratic thing, just to give a thought, industry best practice, and this Sunday reaching out with IU and NIPSCO is, what is industry best practice? And so started a conversation with the Indiana Utility Regulatory Commission, and what is best practice? And the American National Standard Institute Alpha 300 standard is what's popping up. The second thing that's popping up is something they call the SHIGO Guide to Pruning. So this is kind of bureaucracy stuff, but IU working like an academic thing, plus a regulatory thing, plus a utility thing, we might get some, be a stellar and be kind of a test case. And basically the test case involves, somebody else coming in and, doing some studies and stuff like that. But so that's it. Hopefully I didn't have everybody's head explode.
Thanks for the input, Paul. Appreciate it. And comments on that?
I'm interested in the NIPSCO contacting maintenance. I think that would be great. Actually, dollars are one thing, education is another, and being on the same page with them, because my impression, there's a lot of people concerned about them just hacking away,
Yeah, I brought that up at the last council meeting, and I said, everybody know what the guidelines are, and let's face it, and I asked them, and he said, there are people who said the guideline is 20 feet from the power line.
every limb.
20 feet from the power line. So as you notice, some of these trees they cut back to the trunk of the tree. I don't know if those limbs never grow back, do they? Do they actually grow back?
It depends on the tree and how healthy it is and stuff. Yeah, probably not if it's cut clear of the trunk.
Yeah.
So at least
So
by that limb could have new growth elsewhere.
So that's what they were doing. So I wouldn't call it pruning.
No, no, it's fine.
Oh, I have a,
Okay, so, Paul's talking about, we actually met at the library and,
Can I have your name, please?
oh, sorry, Lee Marshall, Boo Marshall. What you call him. So, NIPSCO was in my alley. Well, it wasn't NIPSCO, it was Asplin. It was, NIPSCO contracted with. And I went up to them and I said, are you gonna cut anything? They said, oh, yeah, the street. Well, I had the 20-foot conversation, but the guy said, you can refuse it, just have to sign the manifold. Went back to his truck, pulled it out, there was our names, I signed it, it was refusal. I said, I'll just have my guys, I disagreed with them that this one branch is within 20 feet, but they don't measure, they just do it by eye, right? So that was a thing. So anyway, a couple hours later, guy called me from NIPSCO, you signed this refusal, yeah, I'm coming to see the tree, and everything. Hands up, he comes up wearing a West Point hat, my husband's a West Point grad. It was like, we're all related at that point. Great guy. I learned that there's a company called Arborometrics that's contracted with NIPSCO, and they're supposed to go around to everybody and say, we're coming to cut your tree, and people give permission. That was interesting. I'd never heard of them. I'd never known they'd ever come and ask my permission, but obviously they had me on this list, but I was good to go. Now, poor Arborometrics, they're going around Culver and trying to get people to give permission.
Then I'm here.
Well, they're not here.
Yeah.
Exactly. So it's probably impossible. And they just go, okay, we're good to go. So anyway, so I asked the NIPSCO about who contracts to all these people. And it's a woman named Brianna. Hang on, I'm gonna teach them. Let me check your name. Brianna Craven. She's the head of forestry management or whatever, and she's the one. But here's the deal. They don't fund that area very well. NIPSCO doesn't, because guess what? NIPSCO isn't a tree company. They don't want to be in the tree business. And the guy who was telling me, he said, he goes, people will not prune a tree and not prune a tree. They'll fall over, takes down a bunch of wires, and then they call NIPSCO, come and get my tree, right? He said one incident like that can cost them $10,000. And so that's why they whack those trees so horribly. They don't care. I mean, I'm just saying, he said our standards for trimming are NIPSCO's standards for trimming, which, as you might imagine, why you see them cut back too far, et cetera. I don't think they'd be a source of money, but my idea was more that it was a source of us all understanding each other and interacting in a better way for and about the trees here in
Well, that's
Culver.
the new planting part. That's the education piece there that fascinates me.
Yeah, but I'm just
As opposed to-
saying, if that part, I think, is a great idea. I don't think we get the money from them, conceivably, but there might be some interaction in terms of low budgets that you have and low budget that they have. Because she struggles, they don't give that forestry management piece a lot of money. That's not a really well-funded group in NIPSCO. So they're not gonna parcel out dollars to
Oh, yeah.
tree commissions. I'm just saying that, but interacting with her, and getting to know her and having a better plan for how, when these places come into Culver. Because they said that Arborometrics goes through street by street through Culver. And then goes back and says, these are all the trees that need to be whacked back. And I'm like, why don't we know that? And why aren't we in it with them? Why aren't we included in the street by street trip? Because I think I even said something out on Town Garden Lake going, who knew? I never knew that I could refuse, having a tree trimmed and do it myself. And they didn't make me prove it or whatever. It was just like, hey, fine, we want to prune back just a little bit. To me, it's more about like a control and knowledge thing than maybe necessarily money. But I still think it's a very valuable relationship to have. Because I learned a lot just by accidentally running into those guys. And I also now have another great contact at NIPSCO.
I had asked when I saw what they were doing. And then they were, in some areas, they were doing trees that were over the street
Yeah.
versus the wires.
Yeah.
And I asked the manager, since we may be hiring somebody to prune trees, I need a list of what NIPSCO's doing. So we're not looking at the same thing, and he really couldn't get that from NIPSCO.
I saw the manifolds. They have a list. I saw it. it's not like somebody's handwriting, it's a list, it's a generated list. And that was my thing with her was, hey, that's a relationship to have and that's somebody to interact with. Metrics. Did you say you heard of Metrics?
Yeah, and I've talked to the guy too. They're supposed to, I think, and that's where getting everybody together at one room at one
Right,
time. would
makes
be
sense,
good. They're
yeah.
supposed to put a doorknob tag with a number to call if you need to call a number, that there are trees in your blah, blah, blah to be cut. Call if you have concern kind of.
Just on that same little note of one little idea I had, okay, so interacting with these guys and getting a better idea of, what needs to be addressed. Maybe through the town, because the hard thing is CRC and money. I think CRC reluctantly gave you guys money one time. And they said, this isn't really what we do, but they gave you money one time. I think it would be great to have them help you. But I thought it would be kind of cool. Now, maybe this is just way too broad, but I'm just saying it out loud. But you know how we have the sidewalk program? Like if you repair your sidewalk and they fund it and you get up to some, they'll pay 50%, town will pay. What about a tree pruning program where, when you have a tree on somebody's property that is threatening, it's identified as a tree where, the person can prune it themselves, but apply to the town for some sort of underwriting with that. It is expensive to prune trees. I do mine all the time, so I know what it costs. So I get it that people can't always prune their trees, but maybe there could be like a tree program, like the sidewalk program.
For some of this, we were involved in removing trees for quite a few years.
Yeah.
It got to a point where we couldn't plant trees because we were always removing trees. So the town said they're going to give that area to the street department. Removal and grinding stumps and all that. So we are just in charge of planting in parkways and pruning. Town has a lot on their, the street department has a lot on their plate. A lot of various pruning that should have took place or removal of limbs that could be a hazard. And we got to because you got so much other stuff. So that's where that is.
Yeah, no, I know it's hard, but I do think partly it's funny, you guys are kind of a little quiet board, tree commission, but I think you guys would be successful raising money. Just me, because I think a lot of people around here care about.
Well, we haven't done it in the past. I think it's a good idea because $15,000 a year is not a whole heck of a lot. Now, we are in a small area compared to other places. I don't know how, we talked about, bicentennial, I didn't know, 250 trees. I don't, we didn't put 250 trees. There's only so much room. You can't put trees next to each other. And you want to do it in a way that's going to be viewed correctly instead of, let's not, just because we can, doesn't mean that area needs a tree. There's other areas that they need it. There's a lot of trees.
Well, and the maintenance issue becomes huge. That to me is what is, I was trying to think of something to underwrite that maintenance. And therein lies the potential benefit of the relationship with NIPSCO, by the way, because you don't want to plant trees or to grow into wires and you don't want to plant trees with it. And, they don't want to be in the tree cutting business. They don't want to be. They have to because they're in the business of delivering power. And, so they don't care about pruning the tree beautifully. I'm being equal.
No,
But they really don't
But they do
care, right? So there's some more interaction with them about having a plan and, maybe then if they're gonna prune something or if they, we could be more in charge of that and how it looks and I don't know. It just seems like there's a worthy relationship to be had there.
Oh, yeah.
Paul?
Yeah, add what Boo did. Yeah, an exit, when Boo sent out on town of Gown, we hooked up and had a chat about everything. It was pretty neat. The intent is, to work different things. You have big corporations and, you got the linesmen and they do things in metrics. So based on that, got a lead, followed it up to the corporate level forest management. So they're kind of like the compliance people. So when they come down and see, one, set up an education. So instead of being generated at the working level by utility based on, hey, I got a phone call, tree hit a line, or whatever, it'll be a dedicated approach coming down from the forestry management section. And then they'll do a little crosswalk and they'll peek and say, okay, here's what was pruned. What do you think? Did it meet your standard? And that's where that ANSI 300 and all that comes in. And then Arbormetrics, see what they have. I don't know if they can export a flat file or ArcGIS, but you can layer the NIPSCO pruning thing. And I think that ties in with the IU master plan of, maintenance. They will probably see a few things that, other folks, everybody sees a little different. So they might say, hey, that's going to go down pretty quick, or this is going to do that. And everything's geo-specific, and that's part of the GIS system is we just layer it. And
Well, can I interrupt you?
sure,
We need
sure.
contact with them. Can you get somebody that you're talking to and maybe come to a meeting and have face to face?
It's the gal's name is Brianna. Not sure, forget the back name, but she's willing to travel here. They're outside of Valpo, coming down. I said I'd give her a call mid-July, based on estimate that I used, got the rough cut. Stay away from Lake Fest the weekend of 18-20, so maybe that following week come down, and part of that would be like just tree commission education. They'll bring a person, they'll give their thoughts on pruning and stuff, and then the crosswalk with IU and all that, and and they're willing to come back too. So like next year, whenever pruning cycle, they'd come down and participate in education beforehand or answer questions or whatever to manage expectations. So shouldn't be any surprises. The town, via the forest management section, would have a heads up. It'd be on their multi-year plan and our multi-year plan. That's it.
NIPSCO doesn't come every year, do it? Paul?
When I say every year, it's a cycle of just touching base with them. Doesn't mean you necessarily execute anything, but maybe every July we kind of say, hey, it's education week for the tree commission or something like that, and we try to sync up and talk with everybody over pair-wise, multi-wise, different ways. So may not do anything, but at least you're going to check what's going on once a year.
All right, let's see if we can put that together for sometime in July. Meantime, we need to move along here, so.
Can I really quickly jump?
Sure.
I just wanted to touch on some points, and then, I know this is a larger conversation for long-term planning and beyond the 100 trees that I'm working with, but I think we're talking a lot about working with firms or organizations and making connections, and I do want to say that I am currently in contact with a consulting firm that does urban forestry, so Davy Resource Group, like I think their motto is the tree people. So I think when thinking about labor, of like connecting with NIPSCO or other, utility companies that do a lot of contracting, I agree that that's a great resource, but also throwing it out there that we are currently resourced with connections for Davy Resource Group that we know are going to be doing that work within the 3 years following planting. So I just want to offer that, and I'm happy to, reach back out to my connections to see what type of, education or training resources that might be interested.
Somebody said that, right? So my question would be for them, if they're taking care of these other three, will they work with us on a plan to take care of all the stuff we put in?
I
They're here anyway. Maybe that's how we stretch our budget. If they're here anyway, And then instead of them doing it as part of a grant, they're also getting some compensation from the commission, whether we can afford it or not, remains to be seen, but we have,
raise the
it's a
money.
good question to ask,
Yeah,
correct?
whatever.
Yes, or give us a gold raise, absolutely. Just take blue on it. Perfect.
Yeah, and then, to the point
Oh,
of
I know.
GIS and layer making, I may have not made this clear, but the urban tree canopy cover is a map layer that I currently have. And so Danger Resource Group has already come in and mapped trees with existing data. That will look a little different with the tree removal that I'll have to update to identify, it's called like no planting sites. So that would be like, this is a baseball field. It looks like an empty place. You go there, you can't plant trees. That sort of thing. Or this is a utility line, so avoiding that. This looks like open space, but we know this exists, so we won't plant there. So that's something that I am working through and can send back out to all of you for your insight and opinions as well. And then if there is a connection with NIPSCO and we feel like it would be valuable, I may be able to send that over as well. They're like, actually in 3 years, there's gonna be a new utility line in this space. I'm not super familiar with the timeline of utilities companies or NIPSCO in general. But yeah, just throwing that out there, I wanted to touch on those points that were mentioned, and kind of what that can look like for this summer. And in the future.
Is the plan, is culvert, Emerson, did they define culvert to you? Like, is it within, it's a very small definition, is the voting block of culvert?
The town limits, I believe, there was discussion around the academy. If trees were to be installed there, I think then that opens discussion about resource use and, what you're serving. And I think that, the academy is incredibly well resourced, so I think I would personally prefer to prioritize planting outside of that area, thinking more about town boundaries. I really appreciated the point about the redevelopment commission, and I do think thinking about if Culver is growing, where do we want to plant trees to maybe encourage or, have long-term benefits for where we expect them to be, but also not plant trees in a place that's going to be a construction zone. 5 years. Just hard to say.
The culvert town are very small, that's the only thing, I just didn't know if we got outside that at all. But it's all right, it's still a decent,
Yeah,
area.
I can definitely check
Not
in,
bad.
because I mean, to your point, yes, like 100 trees in Dearborn County was
Yeah,
very different
yeah.
than. And check in, if we're stuck to town limits or can go slightly beyond.
All right, well, I appreciate your input. Yeah. Responses and the questions, and then we have a couple areas to clean up. You're all finished with your presentation. You don't have to sit through this.
No, I want to learn the only questions I can ask at the end of the meeting, but just as I continue to place myself, if there's any other people I should connect with in the community that you have recommendations with, so that could be an organization and they've already contacted a few people, or it's like Joe lives on this road and he knows fun facts about trees. Any type of contact would be valuable.
We have several. We have the Lions Club, we have Kiwanis Club. I'd probably love to have you come and speak. They're always looking for.
And
It's the Culver Youth Club as well. They've got Culver Youth Club summer camp coming up, which I remember. Yeah, I mean, that was the thing that stuck to me in kindergarten. We all got a tree. So I don't know. I'm sure, I'm not sure what the specifics are of the internship, but maybe if there's like a community outreach part, I mean, it's showing a different, talking to a different side of the population in Culver Youth Club.
So it'd be a source too. Volunteer funds. Some of those places. Okay. If we're finished with that, I had a couple of things that I needed to clean up. I'm gonna hand you out the ordinance and changed and amended. Okay, the ordinance was changed. Section 1 from the residents, as far as being on the tree commission, to property owners. And then section 3, they took out the park board because there's no longer a park board. The tree commission was never involved in doing anything in the park. Well, since there is no longer a park board, they took that language out. So if we wanted to, park needed assistance or whatever from the tree commission, we'd be able to do it. And that's the changes in the ordinance regarding the creation of the tree commission.
Does that mean you only need to call her address?
No, you have to own property within the town.
Property owner,
That with a call for address?
right?
You have to own the property.
Within
to
the-
call her.
Within the town, that's like
Oh,
you
it's
said,
still town limit.
you have to own property though, not reside. I think that's what they should.
Yeah, I got it.
Not personal residence.
Okay.
Is
Basically,
there-
is why I'm.
No, I'm like, going to all these people, I'm like, oh god, this guy could be on tree commission now. And I'm like, okay.
Well, there's been several people over the years that wanted to join it.
Yeah.
They couldn't because they weren't permanent residents. So now we got that changed.
Is that,
Step in the right
I
direction.
know what you're saying.
I know there's like renters in town. Has there been any history with people that, live and reside in Culver, but for example, rent an apartment as opposed to owning property? Is there any like concern, or with this new ordinance change, would they be able to be involved?
Not the way that reads.
It'd be a property owner. Person who owned the apartment complex. Okay, next item, as far as budget ideas, we talked a little bit about this. And I guess, interested in ideas of what you guys might have thought of. As far as I kind of mentioned what I thought as far as well, we can take some of the budget and do the main thoroughfares, some trees that we needed in certain areas. And then we can maybe help out the street department with adding it to theirs. They have, I think, the 20-some trees, and they're at 21,850, and their budget's 15,000 too. So in order for them to complete all this, it would need an additional $6,700. And then if we add the ones that I looked up, there was only 2 big ones. The rest were pretty small. I think the town could take those out themselves. As far as they have the equipment. There's a couple of big ones that would probably cost some money. So we can participate in some of that, or we can use ours for planting, getting new trees and doing some more pruning. Here again, that's Dogwood does it. It's going to cost, I think we paid $2,500 for 2 days last year.
Is there any verbiage, if we were to compensate people do we have to compensate, companies that, I mean, obviously, bonding and insured and all that stuff is a factor, but, I know some people that used to work for some of these pruning companies, they since have ceased operations, so they have the skill set. They don't necessarily have a company in place, but can save us a fortune if we can, would a waiver release suffice, or is that not enough? I mean, how deep does this thing go?
Usually to take a bid, depending on the dollar amount, we would have to take bids from some companies.
As part of that bid, we also asked for proof of insurance, liability insurance, because otherwise they don't.
Sure.
If something were to happen, I mean, obviously, it would be something we would need to check with insurance agents. to see how we would navigate through that. But I think the insurance piece would be.
How does that work when we're doing it? We're protected by the town? Like when we're pruning ourselves,
I mean,
what we can reach out. So I-
right. And that's where.
But I'm saying we have a couple more people. You're talking about once we get equipment and ladders. which they don't
If you're
have.
getting into a lot of that sort of stuff. But otherwise, they're operating.
I just had a tulip tree in my front yard and I paid to have pruned my cut light services. They did a great job. Just only, they call it a reduction. Length. They did a great job.
Tall
They
and straight.
took 10 feet off the top, 4 feet all the way around. Because I wanted it on my roof, stuff like that. The nice job, but it was $735 for one tree.
Oh, yeah, no.
Something that I haven't been a part of in the past, I'm not sure how this would look, but, does the county have like a cooperative extension? Office?
For doing extension.
Okay, yes, I used to work
Sorry, I know
for,
you're at IU.
yeah, I used to work for, extension in North Carolina, and something that, I mean, he was the horticulture specialist, but he did like a pruning education program that was free. And so he provided like tools and then taught residents that would come, and then they like got to practice. So that could be maybe something like the education camp, 2 birds, 1 stone, like,
We kind of relocating, get people to water.
yeah, I guess, yeah,
Well,
there.
I looked at.
The other thing, everybody here is kind of old, Emerson, but always.
Yeah, it's,
Sounds great to me though.
That would
I
be.
think I know how to do it, but what if I need to learn something new?
But just another option thinking
Yeah,
about.
no, it's not a bad idea.
Yeah.
It's not a bad idea.
Well, you might find, the academy kids have different goals that they have to work toward, and you may find some volunteers for that, but as far as climbing up trees, I don't know. Yeah, but they certainly may help in planting and things of this nature. But all the time, it's trying to volunteers from school. And even the regular high school too. That's, all right, anybody have any ideas for the budget besides what we talked about?
You know, we used to be just a tree planting, tree commission, then we evolved slowly into removing branches, removing trees. And then our budget, remember we had a couple of years, we had almost no budget because it all went into removing trees rather than planting them. So then we got, I think our last year, we decided when Bob Porter in the street department was going to take over all of that. If we go from 11,000 and have to give them 6,000, we're back to those, what I call those old uncivilized days again. I understand their problem and their budget, but we'll be left with so little, we're not really a tree commission, we're a tree removal commission. And I would like to stay out of that if we can.
Okay.
I don't know if anybody has comments, but
Yeah, I guess, Paul jumping in, I guess what is the ask exactly? Stump removal at what value for what exactly? Did I hear like 21,000 needed for stump removal or?
20,350, and then the stump removal was another 1,500. Well, we've got, there's 4 stumps left. Part of the problem is the property owners, because in order for the stump to be ground, you got to get rid of the sidewalk in that section. And in a couple of cases, the property owner's got landscaping there that needed to be removed before you can remove the sidewalk. So, and then the house sold, and the new buyers, I don't know anything about them, but I don't think they've been in touch or refused to do anything about it, but those stumps have been there for 3 years. So if we're talking about focusing on the beautification culvert, I'd like to see those come out, but I mean,
Yeah, the question is, are we contracting out tree removal, or is this something for Bob Porter for equipment or overtime or what?
Well, he
It's-
doesn't have the equipment to grind stumps.
This is to pay the contractor of the truck for the removal.
So I'm okay with, if the commission wants to leave removal of trees, stumps, tree department. We focus on planting and whatever pruning needs.
What'd you say was the price for this, just for the
I was
stumps?
just about to say that.
Yeah,
It's just.
I mean, that, if that could be a concession that we make, like,
Yeah,
we'll
just to show.
we'll contribute to remove the stumps because those
I
are,
think it's 1,500.
I would make a motion that we volunteer to, it's just a good faith thing. I mean, 1,500 is, the 6 sounded strong, but you know,
Okay,
if we did that, I agree with Kevin, then that's concession.
That's better than 6,500
Yeah.
every year or something too.
that's an eyesore.
Yeah.
are you making that
I
motion?
will, yeah.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 All right.
You know, now that this is a little low, we could solve all of our problems and everything we've talked about today if we do what the city of Los Angeles does. If you're out there in the fall, you know, here we know when it's fall. Out there, the store owners bring in their green plastic trees and put out their brown plastic trees. We don't have to worry about any of this anymore. Maybe we can do that. I don't know.
Where's he going with this? All right.
Okay,
I think a lot of the other budget conversations, in my opinion, is gonna determine a lot of these 100 trees. I mean, I feel maintenance, especially in the beginning, you cannot put enough emphasis on that. I mean, truly, I've planted a lot of trees on property. I'm kind of obsessed by it. I guess that's why I'm sitting here. And I do that maintenance myself because I can, because I walk outside, doesn't matter what time it's done. Wish I had more time, but you know, if there is a way to compensate an organization that are professionals at a hopefully a discounted rate because they're already here, I think that's good use of our funds, and that would be a priority to me. Obviously, the plantings that we need to solve, but again, we've said this more than once. 100 trees is a lot of trees in a small space. Maybe a percentage of those goes in the spots we know we need to relocate, and then the balance are scattered in other places. I guess what I'm saying is maybe we don't have to buy our own. Do you know, can we, for lack of a better term, can we upgrade some of those trees?
Some
we-
that already.
Yeah, so say we said, okay, of the 100, we wanna pony in a little extra money so that 20 of them are a bit larger or a nicer species. You know, some trees are more expensive than others. Some take eons to grow, like a nice birch tree, or be a nice beech tree, you know what I mean? Like a Rivers purple beech tree or a tricolor. I mean, these things are spectacular, but they take so long to grow that they're expensive if you want to get them for the reason. Well, you know this, I know more than me about this stuff, but that's my example, or,
Yeah.
in that budget is that, I mean, I feel like Dennis was kind of alluding to them, but like honey locusts. I mean, there's a reason why honey locusts are in a lot of downtown Chicago. The little leaves, there's less cleanup. They're hardy, healthy trees that all you need to do is pick the growth off the sides. But is that part of the budget? Or is it all going to be, cheap maples? Nothing against maples. Those are great. You know where I'm going with all this.
Yes, definitely. I will be sure, I'm meeting with Davey tomorrow, so I can raise that too in the conversation. I can ask both about if you are interested in.
Yeah, like extended I mean, I don't mean to speak for the group, but extended maintenance. And then, can we, if we can maximize our budget to upgrade a percentage of those, and it could be a very small percentage as opposed to buying our own new. I mean, we don't need 120 trees, right? Total, all in? No.
what I put together there, we have 65
Okay,
spots that we can use.
got it. Perfect.
Those are all in our park spaces, right?
Parkways.
Right, parkways. So, and your 100 can go anywhere, so we could use all of this.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But I mean, in that example, that gives us 35 to put in other places. And maybe, you know, if we're gonna do the entrances, I love that idea. I can't remember who said that. I think it was your job, but maybe we want to do a little bit larger tree, a little strategic, too matching, you know, things like that. And Paul, you know, he sent me a picture and I love it. I mean, the concept of planting them in a row down an avenue that's why they call it an avenue. You know what I mean? It's cool stuff, you know, if we have the opportunity to do that.
Ask a question. You feel like you're gonna laugh when I ask it. Is there a reason you guys don't get more of a budget? Have you ever just gone to town council and go, can we have double what you gave us?
Oh,
It's
yeah,
just not there.
yeah.
It's not there.
That's what we're being told.
Oh.
And there's just a lot of other things going on.
They're not primary.
Require maintenance and new things.
So you always stay right in kind of the 10 down.
Well, it was, they raised it really the last couple of years. We were at 10 or 11.
Mhm.
Went to 12, and then 2 years ago, they raised it to 15, Karen, I think, 2 or 3 years ago.
I think so, and then we added the 15 that we took out tree removal, so in essence, we kind of doubled your budget because
Yeah, we were.
you're not responsible for tree removal
Right.
anymore. We're taking that onto the street department, so.
It's still hard.
No, they said 20
Yeah.
Dogwood Hills, which is expensive, you 20 trees is $8,000, but you do 25, 30 trees, I have 12, 13, they plan it all. So our problem with that, I really like what you said, that we really need to focus on maintenance. Taking care of the trees later. And if we can put that in priority and then intertwine 100 with upgrading certain areas.
I mean, to add that, maybe not to throw another, but to get them professionally fertilized it's a game changer.
Yeah.
You know, I have a guy who's shooting holes and fertilizing and it was like, how are you doing that? I'm like, I'm paying. Which obviously we have that limitation, but maybe we don't. Maybe this is the one year we don't, because we know we've got new trees to fill these spaces. So we can focus on some of those other things. That's gonna really stretch those trees, give them a fighting chance, you know?
So, and you were talking about July or August before you'll actually know what trees.
Yeah, so what I'm working on, I also, in full transparency, I'm about a week behind the rest of the cohorts. I started late because I could not find housing, so I feel like I spoke to everyone in Culver. I spoke to you, Kevin. Thank you. I have a home.
Great.
But I'm a little bit behind. And so right now I'm looking at what Davey has already done for the no planting sites. Kevin is also out this week. So it's also, getting his eyes on that before sending it out to like you all or other people just to confirm like, yes, these are areas we can't plant in. That's where like the utility information comes in that's useful. After the no planting sites are designated, then that's gonna be where the priority planting is. So that can be, to your point, do we want to focus on like avenues or aesthetics? What are the major roads? What's there? Do we want to focus on maybe areas that haven't had as much eyes on them? So like a lot of people live at Main Street. Has anyone looked over on the west side of town? People live here too, that sort of thing. And so that's kind of where that will merge.
Well, if you'd like me to, I certainly can set up a day and get the golf cart out and tour the town.
I would love that.
Let's set up a day to do that. And, get you used to what priority streets are. Then next meeting, maybe sometime in July, where we'd have a little bit more information from her, what they have. In the meantime, we can be thinking about how we can, some kind of a maintenance program that's gonna take place when these trees are planted. That will be annual.
Two other notes. In June, there's gonna be site visits from someone from the Environmental Resilience Institute. So that will probably be Stephanie Friedman Day, who I think you all spoke with back in the spring. I don't have a date for that yet, but if I think it'd be beneficial for you all to meet her, and like that could be another space where if there's other connections or other people that want to meet and having folks in one room. So I can reach back out as soon as I know more information about that. And then my other thought, thinking about budget, thinking about maintenance, also thinking, about like backup funds. I think something, that Bloomington just experienced was, tornado, and that was like 200 trees were damaged. And so suddenly it's like, okay, where's the bucket of money here that can kind of help facilitate this year in maintenance and kind of re-upping those areas of it. Maybe that's also something to think about when thinking about budget and long-term planning.
And, also, date June. But to set that up so they can meet and greet. Okay, anything else? No, we did vote on the, participating in the school.
We did, to contribute the funds to this.
There's nothing else, then I go to the motion to adjourn.
Second.
Oh, just any citizen input?
I heard mention of cookies last time, so I just brought
No.
4 things of cookies to.
About 17, so.
But I also have more buckets if you want to mix up the cookies.
Thank you.
Sorry, Paul. Can't get the cookies.
So the motion to adjourn.
Second.
Favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay.